Hi, I'm Brooke Hernandez with Saw.com. I have Justin Mitchell, CEO and acquirer of Yak.com. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm doing good. Excited to talk with you today.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I know you are busy, especially during this time with your company. So let's get to it. Pretty much, what is the name of your company and what do you guys do?
Yeah, so we are Yak. We started out as Yak Chat, and actually the original name was Yelling Across Cubicles. That's where we get YAC from. So kind of nice little origin story there. We wanted to drop that chat moniker, and we had Yak.chat, and a lot of people don't know that .chat is even a TLD that they can go visit. So yeah, getting Yak.com was super important to us. So Yak is an asynchronous meeting tool for Teams. So we're an audio-first messaging platform. Think of sending voice messages in WhatsApp or iMessage, but for B2B. So you're sending 30 seconds of your voice, maybe a couple minutes of your voice plus what's on your screen. You're sending that off to your team. They're able to reply on their own time. Very similar to this Zoom call that we're on right now, but everybody gets to do it whenever and however they want to instead of having to show up at a predetermined time for a meeting.
That's great, especially right now with everything going on and everyone having to get used to working remote. Being able to allow people to have that kind of option on time frame that works for them is a great idea for a product.
Absolutely.
So, when did your company first conceptualize your brand, and really what were the major factors that you were trying to portray to your customers?
Yeah, November 2019, we were yelling across cubicles. I think when we initially launched, we put some periods in between YAC, and it was an acronym at the time. And then we just got used to calling it Yak. And so it kind of naturally became Yak about a month later. And, we've been that way ever since. A big part of the brand was that it was supposed to be very approachable, kind of easy to pronounce. We really wanted to verb it. So just like you Google something
Right.
or you hop on a Zoom, like there's a way that these words just become naturally extensions of your vocabulary. Let me Slack you something. Let me WhatsApp you this. We wanted yak to become the same type of verb. And so it was very important to us to be easy to say, that it fit with a lot of other kind of verbs that you're already using. We already had actually a brand called BRB, literally be right back, BRB.
Right.
I was kind of yak for the younger generation. And at one point in time, we actually thought about completely rebranding Yak to BRB because the domain was going to be easier to acquire. But as we started kind of playtesting this with everybody that we were talking to, it was very clear that it was difficult to say, let me BRB you. That didn't
Right.
flow quite as well as, hey, did you get my yak? Hey, let me yak you. Well, I've been yakking all day long, right? So the words were much easier to say. And that was a huge part of what we wanted in our brand was a way for us to kind of like normalize the use of the word, colloquially in normal language. And so, that was a big thing that we had going into the brand discussion, as well as this idea of being top of mind. We wanted it to be a word that people got used to. And the domain, yak.com, was a huge part of this idea of if I just tell you yak and you need to go find that somewhere, we need you to be able to Google it. We need you to be able to type it into a browser and it shows up, right? Nobody's going to know to type in .chat. And so that's why the .com was super important to us as well, because it is a non-English word. YAC is not, something that's definable in the Merriam-Webster. And so we needed
Right.
them to be able to easily find it on the web.
I think you guys really thought that through. And like you said, it really is that kind of verb that you use where you're just like, well, I want to go, we need to just yak. Or like you said with the Slack, I think you guys really hit the nail on the head with that idea of the verb being used
Yep.
when they're discussing your guys's product and service. So when you guys were making this big decision, which we kind of compare almost to like naming your firstborn child, I know you kind of went through a little bit of what the process was, but kind of take us through the steps really that your company took when really making that final decision to pick the name and going through that.
We did a similar exercise with the logo as well. Kind of put a bunch of names out there on the table. We typically will do like a Twitter poll sometimes to even kind of like test the waters and see what other people are thinking. But really for Yak, it was kind of the first attempt. I said, I want, we actually have a screenshot in our Slack of me saying, I just want a brand that says yelling across cubicles. That's what I said, is I wanted to have a brand that like exuded that action. And
Right.
one of our designers was like, Yak, YAC. And I was like, oh my gosh, that like was right there in front of me the whole time. I had no idea. So I will say that that in particular was a very simple, almost like instant branding. But we brand stuff all the time. We just built a project over the weekend. We called it Orca. We went back and forth on all kinds of names. We really liked this idea of pods, and whales have pods, and you could join a pod or you could share a pod. So there's all this like nomenclature that came out of the word orca. And then we thought about rebranding that for like younger generation, because Orca is the business unit, and now we have a brand called Koi, which is just the fish, and
Gotcha.
it's basically the same logo but orange, you know. And so we do go through like a whole process of thinking about what's the image that we want to put out. What do we want your first few thoughts to be? Do we want it to be playful? Do we want it to be serious? Do we want it to be enterprise? Do we want it to be, you know, indie? Like there are even projects, actually Yak, when we started it, it was called Yelling Across Cubicles, and then we did the abbreviation YAC. Even the UI, we specifically built it to look bad. It's kind of a weird thing, but we only spent 4 days on the initial project. It was just a hackathon project, and so the UI and the brand was supposed to look kind of like grungy in a way. Like we
Right.
wanted it to look like we threw it together and just like this was the cool thing that we came up with. That was not serious. It was not meant to be like long-term play at all. And that's why like we had a graduation point where we removed the periods, made it all lowercase instead of all uppercase. You know, like we started to slowly pare away that kind of image of independent DIY hackathon and make it into a real startup brand. And so yak.com is this massive moment of going from like hackathon project to fully funded VC startup. And a lot of that had to do with the name. And we do that with a lot of our products, is think through like what's the first thing we want someone to think when they land on this web page. And what we wanted with YAC, or Yelling Across Cubicles, is we wanted them to think, hey, they threw this together for fun in 4 days, because that's literally what happened.
What you guys did.
Now we want them to think this is an enterprise startup, you know, used by major companies all over the world. And those two brand images are very different, and your name has a lot to do with that. The logo has a lot to do with that. Domain has a lot to do with that. And
Right.
so we're thinking through that every time we name a product. And you know, that's part of the branding exercise, is that kind of like gut reaction. What's that initial, I know what I hear and see when I look at that brand. And we do that a lot with a lot of the brands that we're building. Even when from kind of our design agency side, So Friendly, we have a branding questionnaire that we will send off to our clients. And that branding questionnaire is, look at these two images. Which image do you like better? Which font do you like better? Which color do you like better? And that doesn't actually mean that we'll make your logo that color or that font. It just gives us an idea of like where your mental state is with your brand and what you're kind of looking for. And that's so important going into a branding opportunity, is where you are and what your alignment is and what your customer type is, who's your ideal user. All of that stuff is being asked, and all of that goes into a brand. And you know, I could go on and on about this forever, because I truly believe that branding is one of the most paramount things in the entire world when it comes to product design. Because if you can sell somebody at that first click, just like that first moment they land on that web page, then you've got that hook in, and you can start to reel them in with copy, design, features, whatever. If they don't like the brand, though, they're not going to get any further on the website to see anything else.
Oh, completely agree. Completely agree. That's one of the things that we always talk about, is how having that brand even on domain, what is it you're trying to portray? Because that is one of the most important things when they first see it. What's their gut reaction? Because the gut reaction is going to almost make them whether they want to go and, like you said, get more information of what the service is, what the company is, or if they're just going to say, nope, let's move on to the next and see if they work better.
Yep.
So